My name is Jane Miller. I am 68 years old, and for 52 of those years I knew exactly who I was, Jerry Miller's wife. He was my sunrise and my sunset, the steady rhythm to my days in this old house he built with his own two hands. His passing was not a long goodbye. It was a thunderclap on a clear afternoon, a massive stroke while he was sanding a tabletop in his workshop. One minute there was the rhythmic whisper of sandpaper, the next, a silence so profound it seemed to swallow the world. Our son Robert, a corporate lawyer who lived 3 hours away by plane, arrived the following evening. In my shattered state, his presence felt like a life raft. He was tall and capable, my little boy all grown up. He hugged me, a stiff, brief thing, and then immediately took my cell phone from the kitchen counter. "Let me handle all the notifications and calls, Mom," he said, his voice smooth and efficient. "You shouldn't have to deal with that noise right now." I nodded, grateful. But as he slipped my phone into his suit pocket, a small cold knot formed in my stomach. It felt less like help and more like a gentle, unyielding takeover. Before I share what unfolded in the days that followed, a story that changed my understanding of love, family, and betrayal, I'd love to know where in the world you're joining me from today. If you've ever placed your trust in someone only to have it fractured, please tap that like button. And if you'd like to join me for more stories about navigating life's hardest moments, consider subscribing. Your company on this journey means a great deal. The initial relief of having Rob home curdled slowly like milk left out in a warm kitchen. He moved through our house not as a grieving son returning to his childhood home, but as a project manager assessing a site. He was 42, impeccably dressed in suits that cost more than Jerry's first truck, smelling of a sharp citrusy cologne that fought against the familiar comforting scents of beeswax, old books, and coffee that permeated our home. He set up a temporary office at our dining room table, his laptop humming, a shiny new printer beside it. He took over completely. When the kind folks from St. Michael's, the little white church where Jerry and I were married, called to offer their hall for a reception, Rob intercepted the call. "Thank you, but we've made other arrangements," I heard him say, his voice firm. He didn't consult me. I finally gathered the courage to speak up. "Rob, honey, your father and I always talked about a simple service. At St. Michael's, Pastor James knows the family." He looked up from his screen, his expression a mix of patience and faint annoyance. "Mom, St. Michael's is fine for a Sunday service, but this needs to be done properly. I've secured the Elmwood Heritage Chapel. It's dignified. It's what Dad would have wanted for his legacy." The word legacy felt foreign coming from his mouth. Jerry's legacy was in the creak of the stair he'd fixed, in the bowl he'd carved for my birthday, not in a fancy chapel. The first true fissure appeared 2 days before the service. I went into our bedroom to the closet we'd shared for 5 decades. I reached for the suit I knew Jerry loved best, a soft, well-worn navy blue blazer and trousers. He'd worn it to our son's college graduation, to our last big anniversary dinner. As I held the fabric to my face, breathing in the faint ghostly scent of his sandalwood soap, Rob appeared in the doorway. "Oh, Mom, no," he said, his voice softening into a tone one might use with a confused child. "That's not appropriate. I have already arranged for a proper suit from Bernardelli's. It's being delivered to the funeral home this afternoon." "But he loved this one," I said, my voice thin. "It's him." Rob walked over and gently, firmly took the hanger from my hands. He placed it back in the closet. "You're not thinking clearly. It's the shock. Let me take care of the details. That's why I'm here." He placed a heavy hand on my shoulder. "Just rest. Let me take care of it." The phrase began to echo a mantra that didn't comfort but confined. The morning of the funeral was a bleak, drizzly gray, the sky pressing down on the old maple trees in our yard. I dressed with deliberate, almost ritualistic care. I chose a simple long-sleeve black dress, one Jerry had complimented me on just last Easter. I fastened my pearls, the ones he'd given me for our 25th anniversary. I needed armor. I needed to be present for my husband. Rob arrived at 9 sharp. He looked me up and down, and his jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Mom," he began, his voice a careful blend of concern and authority. "I've been thinking. Today's service, it's going to be very formal, very structured. Several senior partners from my firm are making the trip along with some of Dad's former business associates. It's going to be a high-pressure environment." I blinked. "I'm not going to be conducting the service, Rob. I'm going to be saying goodbye to my husband." He sighed, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. "It's not just that. Dr. Evans was very clear about your blood pressure. The emotional strain, a very public grief, it could be dangerous. I can't have you getting ill on top of everything else. He stepped closer, lowering his voice as if sharing a secret. And to be perfectly honest, for the sake of Dad's memory, we need to maintain a certain decorum, a sense of control. You're being there in such a raw state, it might create a scene. It's better for everyone if you stay here where it's quiet and safe. The words landed like physical blows. A scene, decorum, control. He was talking about me as if I were an unpredictable element, a potential embarrassment. I was his mother, and I was being politely surgically removed from my own husband's farewell. You can't be serious? I whispered, my throat tight. It's already decided, Mom. It's for the best. He leaned down and placed a cold kiss on my cheek. I'll have the funeral home send you a private livestream link. You can watch from here in comfort. And then he was gone, the door closing with a soft, definitive click. I stood in the foyer for a long time, trembling. The injustice of it burned through the fog of my grief. I walked to the living room and sank into Jerry's armchair, the leather sighing under my weight. On the coffee table was a single elegant card. Elmwood Heritage Chapel, private livestream access, with a password, Miller Legacy. So that was my seat, front row in my own living room. I watched on my tablet as the camera panned over a room full of strangers in dark suits. I saw Rob step up to the podium, composed and solemn. His eulogy was about a visionary craftsman and building an empire from scratch. It was a corporate biography. He never mentioned the man who sang off-key in the shower, who cried at our son's kindergarten play, who brought me coffee in bed every Sunday for 50 years. He never mentioned me at all. I was a ghost watching my life be erased in high definition. The silence after the funeral was deeper and more profound than the silence after Jerry's death. This was an active and forced silence. Rob did not return to the house. He texted that he was staying at the Hampton Inn to be closer to the myriad legal and financial firewalls that needed immediate attention. My landline phone, the old rotary one Jerry refused to get rid of, rarely rang. When it did, the conversations were stilted. My friend Marge from the garden club called, her voice hushed. Jane, honey, I tried to call your cell, but it went straight to voicemail. Rob said you were under strict orders for rest and no disturbances. He said you were fragile. Fragile. He was building a narrative brick by brick. Jane Miller, the frail, confused widow, incapable of handling her own affairs. It was a cage made of concerned words. My salvation came in the form of Helen, my neighbor, for 43 years. She didn't call. She marched over with a still warm peach casserole, took one look at my face, pale and set with a new hard anger, and kicked off her gardening clogs right there in the foyer. Enough of this nonsense, she declared. We sat at the chipped porcelain kitchen table, the site of 1,000 shared cups of tea. He's isolating you, Jane, Helen said bluntly. No sugarcoating. This isn't grief management. This is a strategic maneuver. I've seen it before with my cousin Ethel's kids. It's about control. Control over what? I asked, my voice hollow. The house, the money. Over everything, Helen said, stirring her tea so forcefully it sloshed. Over the story. He's rewriting it, and he's editing you out of the first draft. Her words ignited a spark of memory. A damp afternoon, maybe 6 years back. Jerry had come home from a long lunch looking thoughtful. Had a good sit-down with Franklin Henderson today, he'd said, hanging his wet raincoat on the hook. Finally got everything squared away. Ironclad. I'd been pruning geraniums on the windowsill and had simply nodded, assuming he meant updating their wills, a mundane task. He'd come over, kissed the top of my head, and said softly, just making sure my girl is protected no matter what. The memory now felt like a flare in the darkness. Franklin Henderson, Jerry's family lawyer since before we were married. His office was above the old brick bank on Main Street, a place time seemed to have forgotten. That night, long after Helen left, I was drawn to Jerry's roll-top desk. In the small, stiff drawer he always kept locked, the key was hidden in a hollowed-out edition of The Old Man and the Sea, beneath bundles of faded receipts and old photographs. I found it, a simple ivory-colored business card yellowed at the edges. Franklin P. Henderson Esquire, attorney at law. And below the printed number, another number handwritten in Jerry's familiar looping script, his private line. My hands shook. I didn't dare use my cell phone. I went to the kitchen and picked up the heavy corded receiver of the old rotary phone. The dial made a satisfying solid click whir with each number. It rang 4 times. Henderson residence. The voice was older, graveled with time, but unmistakably his. Mr. Henderson, it's Jane. Jane Miller. Jerry's wife. A pause, then a warmth infused his words. Jane, my dear child, I heard about Jerry. My heart is with you. I was expecting to see you at the service. The confirmation stung. I wasn't there, I said, and the dam cracked. A sob escaped. Rob, he felt it was best I stay home. The silence on the other end was longer this time, weighty. When he spoke again, the grandfatherly tone was gone, replaced by a crisp professional clarity. I see. Jane, listen to me. I am in possession of Gerald's last will and testament. The final version executed in my office with full competency witnesses, including myself and my secretary Miriam. It supersedes any prior documents. Would you be able to come see me tomorrow? Rob's summons came via text the next evening, as I was still processing my quiet, empowering meeting with Mr. Henderson. Family meeting to address Dad's estate. Thursday, 10 a.m., offices of Dalton and Price downtown. I'll pick you up at 8:30. No question. No discussion. Just a directive. The hour-long drive to the city was a journey through a tunnel of silence. Rob talked at me. Not to me about probate courts, estate taxes, and optimizing asset liquidity. I stared out the window, watching our familiar tree-lined highway give way to anonymous concrete overpasses. In my purse, tucked beneath a handkerchief, was the prepaid flip phone Helen had bought me at the drugstore. Its weight was a secret talisman. Dalton and Price occupied the top floor of a steel and glass monolith. The elevator opened into a silent, minimalist lobby of white marble and abstract art. It smelled of money and disinfectant. A young assistant led us to a conference room with a wall of windows overlooking a cold gray river. At the head of the long, polished table sat a man in his 30s with sharp features and hair hardened with product. Mom, this is Carson Price, my estate attorney, Rob said, his hand on the man's shoulder in a gesture of ownership. I was introduced as my mother Jane, not my father's wife and heir, just my mother. And there, in a upholstered chair in the corner, almost blending into the shadows, sat Mr. Henderson. He wore a tweed jacket that seemed from another century. He gave me a small grave nod. Rob barely glanced at him. Mr. Henderson is here as a courtesy for historical context, Rob explained dismissively to Price. Rob began the meeting. He used terms like chattel, liquidation event, and non-probate transfers. He spoke of the house and workshop as underperforming assets on valuable land. He presented a spreadsheet. My life, our life, was reduced to columns and figures. A cold fury began to simmer beneath my grief. When he started talking about hiring a rapid response real estate team to stage and list the primary residents immediately, I could stay silent no longer. My voice sounded small but strangely clear in the sterile room. Rob, shouldn't we wait for Mr. Henderson to speak your father's will? Rob turned to me, and on his face was a smile of such profound, patronizing patience it took my breath away. Mom, please. We've moved past old wills. We're dealing with the practical legal reality now. He leaned forward, his hands flat on the table. And the reality is, these are intricate financial and legal negotiations. It's a lot for a layperson to process. Frankly, you don't belong in this part of the discussion. It only clouds the issue. Why don't you wait outside? Carson's assistant can get you a latte. He gestured toward the door, a king dismissing a servant. The heir left the room. You don't belong here. After 52 years of marriage, of building a home and a life, I was being told I was an extraneous complicating factor in the disposal of its remains. I looked from Rob's expectant, confident face to Carson Price's politely blank one. My gaze finally found Mr. Henderson's. His old eyes, magnified by his spectacles, held mine. There was no panic there, only a deep, resolute calm. He gave the slightest, most imperceptible incline of his head. A strange tranquility settled over me. The fear evaporated. I stood up. I didn't push my chair back dramatically. I simply rose. I adjusted the hem of my jacket, a gesture that felt both futile and powerfully dignified. You want me to leave, I said, my voice not much above a whisper, yet it carried to every corner. I looked directly at my son. Very well, but before I do acting as Jane Eleanor Miller lawful spouse and surviving widow of Gerald Robert Miller, I formally invoke my right as the presumed principal beneficiary, and hereby demand that Franklin P. Henderson, the named executor in my husband's last valid will and testament, read that document aloud in full in this room before all present, commencing immediately. Rob exploded from his chair, the force of it sending it skidding back to hit the glass wall with a thud. "Mother, this is absurd. You are out of line." Spittle flew from his lips. His composure was utterly shattered, revealing the furious stranger beneath. But Mr. Henderson was already in motion. He placed his worn leather briefcase on the table. The latches opened with two loud, deliberate clicks that silenced Rob's sputtering. He drew out a thick, legal-sized document bound with a dark red ribbon. He untied it with slow, ceremonial care. "Mrs. Miller," he intoned, his voice gaining a courtroom resonance that filled the space, "your demand is not only appropriate under state law, it is in fact your legal right as the surviving spouse. The reading shall proceed." Rob stood, fists clenched at his sides, trembling. I did not wait for the performance to continue. I turned and walked out of the conference room, but I did not turn toward the plush waiting area. I turned left down a short carpeted hallway and pushed open the door to a small utilitarian kitchenette. My hands were perfectly steady. I took the flip phone from my purse, flipped it open, and dialed the number I had committed to memory, the direct line to Sheriff Edward Turner, a man who'd taught Sunday school with Jerry and whose eyes had filled with tears and then hardened with anger when I'd visited him after seeing Mr. Henderson. "It's Jane, Ed," I said when he answered. "It's happening now. Dalton and Price, Suite 1200. And please bring Louise from the clerk's office just as we discussed." When I pushed open the heavy conference room door and walked back in, the scene had frozen into a tense tableau. Rob was leaning across the table, his face inches from Mr. Henderson's, speaking in a low, venomous hiss. Carson Price looked pale, shuffling papers uselessly. Mr. Henderson remained impassive, the unopened will lying before him. All movement ceased as I entered, followed by Sheriff Ed Turner in his full brown uniform, his hat under his arm, and Louise Wilkins, the head probate clerk for the county. A familiar woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense bun. She carried a leather satchel and a notary stamp. Rob's head swiveled. His eyes bulged. "What is the meaning of this?" he snarled, his voice cracking. "Mom, have you lost your mind? Sheriff, this is a private family legal meeting." Sheriff Turner stood with his feet slightly apart, his thumbs hooked in his belt. His voice was calm but carried the full weight of his office. "We're here at the request of Mrs. Jane Miller to serve as impartial witnesses to the reading and immediate notarization of a last will and testament pursuant to state code. Please resume your seat, Mr. Miller." It wasn't a suggestion. Rob slowly sank into his chair, looking utterly defeated for a moment before a new calculating glare took over. Mr. Henderson nodded to the sheriff and Mrs. Wilkins. He cleared his throat, put on his reading glasses, and began. "Last will and testament of Gerald Robert Miller." The familiar legal phrases flowed. Then he reached the operative sections. "Article 3. I hereby give, devise, and bequeath all of my worldly possessions, both real and personal, tangible and intangible of every kind and description, and wheresoever situated, including, but not limited to, my primary residence and all land at 214 Maple Creek Road, my woodworking workshop and all tools, machinery, and materials therein, all bank accounts, investment portfolios, stocks, bonds, and insurance policies, and all personal items, including vehicles, jewelry, and household furnishings, to my beloved wife Jane Eleanor Miller, to be hers absolutely in fee, simple for the duration of her natural life, with full and unrestricted power to sell, transfer, manage, or bequeath said properties as she sees fit." He paused, letting the full sweeping scope of it settle. The only sound was Rob's ragged breathing. Mr. Henderson continued, his voice softening slightly. "My reasons are thus. For over half a century, Jane has been my partner in every sense. She was the heart of our home and the quiet strength behind every success. She sacrificed, supported, and loved unconditionally. Her future security, comfort, and happiness are my foremost and final concern. This estate is not an inheritance she receives from me, but a rightful testament to the life she helped build, piece by piece, day by day. It is, and always has been, as much hers as mine." A single hot tear traced a path down my cheek. Jerry was speaking to me through time, through paper. He was defending me in the one way he could. Mr. Henderson turned the page. Article 4. For my son, Robert James Miller, I leave the sum of $25,000 to be dispersed from my checking account. Rob made a sound like a gut punch. And furthermore, Mr. Henderson read his tone, becoming deliberately even. I leave to my son the first set of professional woodworking tools I ever owned, a set of Stanley planes and chisels given to me by my own father. They are stored in a pine box in the attic of my workshop. I leave these not for their monetary value, which is minimal, but in the earnest hope that by holding them he may one day come to understand the profound dignity of creating something useful with your own hands, the integrity of honest labor, and the true unshakable foundation upon which a meaningful life and a real legacy is built, not in bank accounts but in character. The silence that followed was absolute profound. Every vestige of Rob's smirk, his arrogance, his condescension had been utterly erased. His face was a blank page of shock rapidly filling with the ugly ink of humiliation and dawning furious understanding. He was not the master of this ceremony. He was a bit player handed a walk-on role and a moral parable. Carson Price started to stammer about filing a motion to contest on grounds of undue influence. Louise Wilkins spoke for the first time, her voice crisp. I have personally notarized 3 prior versions of Gerald Miller's wills over the past 20 years. The testamentary capacity and intent were consistently clear. This final document is the most explicit and deliberate of all. I see no grounds for contest that would hold up in my court. Sheriff Turner simply nodded in agreement, his eyes on Rob a silent warning. Rob said nothing. He stared at the polished tabletop, then slowly pushed his chair back. He stood avoiding my eyes entirely and walked to the door. He opened it and left without a word, without a backward glance. The soft click of the latch was the sound of a door closing forever. The immediate aftermath was a whirlwind of quiet paperwork and a deafening personal silence. Rob did not call. He did not write. A week later, a formal letter arrived from Carson Price stating that Robert Miller would be respecting the terms of the instrument and would not be contesting the will. I knew it was because Mr. Henderson had sent him the sworn affidavits from the witnesses and the security camera footage from his office lobby showing a vibrant, clear-eyed Jerry laughing and shaking his hand after signing. The battle was over before it began. The victory felt hollow for a long time. I had won the house, the money, the security, but I had lost my son. The grief for that loss was a different, more complicated ache than the grief for Jerry. Jerry's absence was a clean amputation. Rob's was a gangrenous wound poisoned by betrayal. I had moments of crushing guilt. Had I been too harsh? Had I driven him to this? But Helen and even the gentle, firm counsel of Mr. Henderson helped me see I had not done this. Rob's choices, his values, his greed had done this. My only choice was whether to let him consume what Jerry had left me. I chose to live. Not just exist, but live. I did not sell the house. I paid off the modest mortgage that remained. I had the roof repaired, the porch that Jerry had always meant to rebuild finally fixed with stout new timber. It felt like a metaphor. Then one afternoon I was in the workshop dust motes dancing in a sunbeam that fell across Jerry's old workbench. The silence was no longer oppressive. It was peaceful. I remembered how he'd tried to teach a young Rob to use a coping saw, and how Rob had fidgeted bored wanting to go play video games. A thought bloomed gentle but persistent. I called the principal of the local elementary school. A month later, Mr. Jerry's Workshop Wednesdays began. It's not an official program. It's just me and 5 or 6 kids from the neighborhood aged 9 to 12 whose parents think they might benefit from less screen time and more tactile learning. We don't build anything fancy. A birdhouse, a small toolbox, a little wooden car. I teach them how to measure the importance of sanding with the grain, the satisfaction of a tight-fitting joint. Their faces smudged with sawdust and lit with concentration fill the space with a new kind of life. They call me Miss Jane. Their laughter is the best sound this old house has heard in years. The pain of Rob's absence hasn't vanished. It probably never will. Some nights I look at his childhood photo on the mantel, and my heart breaks anew. But I have learned to carry that sorrow alongside the peace I've fought for. I've learned that family is not a prison sentence you must endure, but a garden you tend. And sometimes for the health of the entire garden you must prune back a diseased branch no matter how much it hurts. Jerry's final gift wasn't the financial security, as immense a relief as that is. His final gift was the restoration of my voice. He handed me back my own agency, my own sovereignty in the nick of time. He looked into the future and saw the trap being laid, and he built me a way out. My story isn't about a dramatic, angry confrontation. It's about the quiet, earth-shattering power of a love that speaks from beyond the grave. It's about finding the courage to stand up in a room where everyone has told you to sit down and to speak your truth even when your voice shakes. If you're listening to this and you feel yourself being made small, being told you're too emotional or don't understand in your own life, I want you to hear me. You are the expert of your own experience. Your feelings are your compass. Find your Helen. Find your Franklin Henderson. Listen to that quiet but stubborn voice inside that knows what is right. And then take the next small, brave step. Thank you for spending this time with me. Your listening feels like a shared strength. Where have you found your courage when you needed it most? I would be honored to read your stories in the comments below. If this message of quiet resilience spoke to you, please give this video a like. It helps others find this community. If you'd like to join me for more conversations about healing family and rebuilding, please hit subscribe. And if you know someone who needs to be reminded of their own strength today, please share this with them. Wishing you all profound peace, the clarity to see your own worth, and the courage to build a life that honors it.